You need to run. Something is behind you, or something has gone wrong, or something is about to happen that you cannot allow to happen. And you turn to run, and your legs will not work. Not the way legs fail in life, where you are slow or tired. Something worse. You push, and the push does not arrive. Your body has become thick, heavy, wading through something that is not there. You are putting in everything you have and moving at almost nothing. So you try to shout, and there is no sound. Your mouth is doing the shape of a scream, and the air is refusing to carry it. And then, somewhere underneath all of it, a thought forms, the one that comes to everyone eventually and the worst of them. Wake up. Just wake up. This is not real. Open your eyes and it stops, and you cannot. You lie there, inside a thing you know at some level is not happening, and the exit will not open, and the whole experience continues at full volume until it decides on its own to end. Then you are awake in a dark room with your heart going, and within about a minute it is already breaking apart, and by breakfast it will be a vague feeling you cannot explain to anyone. Now, here is what should stop you, and it never does, because you are too busy being relieved. You made all of it. There was no one else there. No outside force, no external input, nothing coming in through your eyes or your ears. The room, the corridor, the thing behind you, the weight in your legs, the silence where your voice should have been. Every single element of that experience was generated by your own brain out of nothing for an audience of one. You were the author, and the author could not get out of the story. So here's the question. Not, why do we dream, which everybody asks and nobody has fully answered. A stranger question hiding inside a thing that happens to you constantly. Why can't you leave? Sit with how strange that is, because there are actually two mysteries, and most people only notice one. The first is the one you just felt. You cannot control it. You cannot exit it. You are the sole producer of the entire experience, and you have no editorial authority whatsoever. But there is a second one, and it is worse. You do not notice. Think about the things you accept in dreams without the smallest objection. You are in your childhood home, except the layout is wrong, and there is a room that has never existed, and this does not strike you as unusual. A person you know is there, and they also look nothing like themselves. And both of those facts are true simultaneously, and neither one bothers you. You are late for an exam in a subject you have not studied since you were 17, in a building you have never been in, and the emotion that arrives is pure, straightforward panic about being late, not confusion. Not wait, I finished school 2 decades ago. Your critical faculty does not merely weaken in there, it appears to be absent. And this is the same brain that during the day catches the tiny wrongness of a friend's tone in a text message. The same brain that notices when a receipt is 50 pence out. The same brain that watches a film and thinks that would never happen. Every night that machinery goes somewhere, and you have never once wondered where. So, there it is. 2 things at once. You cannot leave, and you cannot tell you need to. Those might be the same problem. The first explanation is the one everyone reaches for, and it is comfortable enough that almost nobody pushes on it. You are asleep. Of course, you have no control. You are unconscious. Your mind is off, and dreams are what happens when a switched-off brain rattles a little random firing, throwing up random images with no author and no plan. You are not trapped in a dream. You are simply not there. It is a tidy answer. It is also badly wrong, and the moment you look at your actual experience, it falls apart. Because you are not absent in a dream. You are vividly, unmistakably there. Think about what you were doing in that nightmare. You were reasoning. Badly, but reasoning. You worked out that you needed to run. You made a decision about which way to go. You felt fear, which requires an evaluation of what is happening and what it means for you. You had a point of view. You were located somewhere looking out from behind your own eyes. That is not unconsciousness. That is consciousness running in a very unusual configuration. And the random noise idea does not survive either. Because random noise does not have plots. Dreams have people in them who behave like people. They have places that persist while you walk through them. They have events that follow one another, a beginning and a middle, and a sense that things are at stake. Static does not do that. Whatever is producing your dreams is a system with enormous generative power running at full capacity, constructing an entire world in real time. That is not a brain that is off. That is a brain doing something extremely difficult. And there is a third problem, which is the one that eventually cracks this open. Some people do notice. There are people who in the middle of a dream realize it is a dream. And the moment they do, some of them can act. They can change what happens. A few can decide where to go. If dreaming meant unconsciousness, that would be impossible. You cannot become lucid inside a switched-off brain, which means the thing that traps you is not the absence of your mind. It is the absence of one specific part of it. To see which part you have to stop thinking of sleep as your brain going quiet, it is not quiet. During the phase of sleep where most vivid dreaming happens, your brain is running at levels of activity comparable to being awake. Some regions are running harder than they do in daylight. But it is not uniform, and that is everything. When researchers began imaging brains during this state, a pattern emerged that explained things people had wondered about for centuries. Work by Allan Braun and colleagues at the end of the 1990s was among the first to show it clearly. Certain regions were dialed down, others were dialed up, and the regions that went quiet were with almost comic precision exactly the ones you would need in order to escape. Toward the front of your brain, behind your forehead, sits the machinery of your judgment. This is the region most associated with reasoning about what makes sense, holding a plan in mind, weighing whether something adds up, and thinking about your own thinking. It is the part of you that says, hang on, and during dreaming sleep, it is substantially deactivated. Meanwhile, the deeper structures, the ones that generate emotion and threat and significance, are highly active. In some cases, more active than when you are awake. Now put those two facts side by side and look at what you have built. Emotion at full power. Judgment offline. That is the recipe, not a random glitch. A specific configuration running every night of your life in which the loudest voice in your head is fear, and the part of you that would normally interrogate it is not at its desk, which is why the wrongness of the dream never registers. You do not fail to notice that your dead grandmother is casually in the kitchen. Noticing would require the system that compares incoming experience against what you know to be possible. That system is not running. Nothing objects, so nothing seems strange. And that also explains the specific texture of dream logic. Not nonsense, exactly. Something more unnerving, perfectly coherent reasoning built on premises that were never checked. You accept the premise. Then you reason flawlessly from it. Of course I must get to the exam. Of course the corridor leads to the beach. The reasoning is intact. The auditing is gone. But this only explains half of the trap. It explains why you do not object. It does not explain why your legs will not work. Because that part is not psychological. That part is physically true. During dreaming sleep, your body is paralyzed. Not metaphorically. Not as a manner of speaking. Your brainstem is actively sending signals that suppress the motor neurons controlling your skeletal muscles, and for the duration of that phase, your body will not obey commands. Your eyes still move. Your breathing continues. Your heart is fine. Everything else is switched out of the circuit. We know why this exists because of an experiment done on cats in the 1960s by a French neuroscientist named Michel Jouvet. Jouvet identified a small region in the brainstem that appeared to be responsible for this paralysis. And he damaged it in sleeping cats, and then watched what happened. The cats stayed asleep. By every measure available, they remained in the dreaming phase, unconscious of the room around them. And they got up. They stalked things that were not there. They arched their backs at invisible threats. They pounced and pawed and performed the complete choreography of hunting an animal that did not exist. They were acting out their dreams, which told everyone something important. The motor commands are being generated, the whole time. Your dreaming brain is not imagining running in some abstract way. It is issuing genuine instructions to move. And every one of those instructions is being intercepted before it arrives. That is what the paralysis is for. It is a safety system. Without it, every person on Earth would spend each night physically performing their dreams in a dark room near stairs and windows and other people. So now look at what happens when you dream you are running. Your brain sends the command. The command is blocked. And there is a strong case that what you experience as that awful heaviness, the pushing against nothing, is what a motor instruction feels like when it goes out and nothing comes back. And it explains the other thing, the one that is somehow worse than the legs, the scream that will not come. Producing sound is not one action. It requires your diaphragm to drive air upward with force your vocal folds to close to exactly the right tension, and your throat and jaw and tongue to shape what comes out. Dozens of muscles coordinated precisely. Every one of them is in the group that gets locked down. Your breathing keeps going because that is run by a separate system that is never switched off. But breathing is not shouting. Shouting is a deliberate, forceful, finely controlled act, and deliberate acts are exactly what the paralysis exists to prevent. So, you do the whole thing. You take the breath, you make the shape, you push with everything you have. And what arrives in the room, if anything, is a small, strangled sound that would not wake a person lying next to you. You are not being silenced by the dream. You have been unplugged, and the dream is simply where you found out. You are not imagining being unable to move. You are, in a very real sense, actually unable to move, and your dreaming brain is building a story to explain why. And that habit of inventing an explanation for whatever it detects turns out to be the engine driving the whole experience. You can watch it happen with something as ordinary as an alarm. Your alarm goes off, and instead of waking you, it gets absorbed. It becomes a phone ringing in the dream, or a siren, or a bell in a building you have never been in. Within a fraction of a second, your sleeping brain has generated an object, placed it in the world, and written it into the plot. The same thing happens with the room. A cold draft becomes weather. A full bladder becomes a desperate search for a bathroom in a dream that will build corridor after corridor and never once let you find one. Pressure on your chest becomes something sitting there. Your brain is receiving a signal it cannot ignore, and rather than stopping to ask what it is, it manufactures a reason. This is what your mind does when it has a sensation and no explanation. It fills the gap instantly and confidently, and it does not flag the invention as an invention. Now take that engine and put it in a body that is paralyzed in a brain, flooded with emotion, with no critic on duty, to reject a bad explanation. You feel fear with no cause. So the mind supplies a cause, and now something is chasing you. You send a command to run and get nothing back. So the mind supplies a reason, and now the air is thick. You are not watching a dream unfold. You are watching a very fast, very fluent explanation machine running with the quality control switched off. And this is where the two halves of the trap come together. You cannot run because your body is genuinely disconnected. And you cannot notice that something impossible is happening because the part of you that notices is offline. Trapped in the story by paralysis. Trapped in believing it by an absent critic. Both locks. Every night. On a door you built yourself. Except there is a third lock, and it is the quietest one. And it may be the reason you never escape even on the nights you almost do. Your memory is not working properly either. Think about what a dream is missing. You are in a building. How did you get there? You do not know, and more importantly, you do not ask. There is no before. The dream begins wherever it begins, and you accept the situation as though you have always been in it. That is not a small detail. That is your grip on your own recent past being gone, and it explains something that happens to almost everyone at least once. Occasionally in a nightmare, the thought does arrive. This is a dream. For a second, something in you gets there, and then it slips. You do not act on it. You do not hold it. The realization surfaces and dissolves, and 3 seconds later you are running down the corridor again as though the thought was never there. To act on a realization, you have to keep it in mind while you do something about it. That holding is a job, and it is done by the same frontal machinery that has been dialed down for the night. So the insight arrives with nowhere to live. It cannot survive long enough to become an action. There is a chemical dimension to this too, and it is remarkable. The dreaming phase of sleep is essentially the only time in your life when your brain is running almost entirely without noradrenaline, one of the main chemicals involved in alertness and in laying down memory, which is why the whole thing evaporates. You wake with the dream vivid and complete, and you can feel it going even as you reach for it. By the time you are standing up, most of it is gone. By lunchtime, there is nothing but a mood. You have lived through tens of thousands of these. Full, immersive, emotionally overwhelming experiences, each 1 hour long, and you remember almost none of them. That is the third lock. Not just that you cannot leave and cannot notice. You cannot keep hold of the one thought that would have got you out, and afterwards you cannot even keep the evidence that it happened. Now here is where it gets genuinely unsettling because those systems do not always switch off and on together. They are separate mechanisms, and separate mechanisms can fall out of step. Imagine consciousness returning before the paralysis lifts. You wake up. Your mind comes back online. You know where you are. You can see your room. You understand that you were asleep, and now you are not, and you cannot move. Not one muscle. You try to sit up and nothing happens. You try to speak to call out, and your voice is not connected to anything. This is sleep paralysis, and a large proportion of people experience it at least once. It usually lasts under a minute, though people almost always report it as far longer. And it frequently comes with something else, because the dreaming machinery has not fully shut down either. So the imagery of the dream state gets to run while your eyes are open and your room is right there. The result is that people see things in the room, presences, shapes near the door, a pressure on the chest, a sense extremely common and extremely specific that someone is in the room with them. Cultures across the world have their own name for it, and the descriptions line up so closely across centuries and continents that the pattern itself becomes evidence. Different names, same visitor, same chest, same helpless frozen body. Nothing supernatural required. The imagery generator is still running while the reality checking system is halfway back and the body is still locked out. But sit with what this proves. That awful feeling of being trapped in a dream is not a metaphor your mind invented. It is a report on a physical fact. You really are held. It really is happening. The only unusual part of sleep paralysis is that you are awake enough to file an accurate description. There is one more version of this, and it is the cruelest because it uses your own certainty against you. The false awakening. You wake up. You are in your room. You get out of bed and the floor is cold and you walk to the bathroom and turn on the tap and everything is exactly as it should be. And then you wake up again. Still in bed. Nothing happened. You never got up. For some people it loops. 3 times. 5 times. Each awakening completely convincing, each one containing all the ordinary details of a normal morning and each one turning out to be another floor of the same building. Now look at why that works so well. Waking up is the one event your dreaming brain has watched more than any other. Tens of thousands of rehearsals. It knows the light, the sheets, the weight of your own body, the specific dullness of a room at 7 in the morning. It can build that better than it can build anything else. And the part of you that might have said, hold on, did I actually get up, is the part that has not come back yet. So you get the perfect forgery delivered to an audience with no capacity to inspect it, which is the whole thing in miniature. It is not that dreams are strange enough to fool you. It is that nothing is checking, which raises a question about the nightmares themselves. Why would evolution allow this? Why build a machine that generates terror you cannot escape and then hold you in place while it plays? There is an idea proposed by a Finnish researcher named Antti Revonsuo that takes the question seriously. It is a hypothesis rather than settled fact, and plenty disagree with it, but it is worth hearing. His suggestion is that dreams are a rehearsal. Look at what dreams are actually about. Across cultures, across ages, the content skews heavily toward threat. Being chased, falling, being attacked, losing someone, being exposed, judged, unprepared. Dreams are not a random sample of your life. Almost nothing in there is a pleasant afternoon. The proposal is that the dreaming brain is running simulations of danger in a body that cannot get hurt so that the responses get practiced somewhere safe. And if that is what it is for, then notice what follows. A rehearsal you can walk out of is worthless. If you could think this is only a dream and shut it down, the simulation would never run. The fear would never be produced. Nothing would be practiced. So the design that traps you might not be a flaw in the system. It might be the requirement. The critic has to be off or you would not believe it. The body has to be locked or you would injure yourself. And the exit has to be unavailable or you would take it every time and learn nothing. Whether or not the rehearsal idea turns out to be right, the architecture is undeniably built that way. You are not accidentally trapped. You are held. And yet the door is not completely sealed, which is the strangest part of all of this. Because there are people who become lucid, who realize inside the dream exactly what is happening. And when researchers looked at what was different in their brains during those moments, they found activity returning to the front of the brain. The critic coming partially back online without waking the sleeper. Which fits everything above. Restore the judge, and the verdict changes. And then it went further than anyone expected. A few years ago, teams of researchers, including a group at Northwestern University working with Konkoly and Ken Paller, ran something remarkable. They trained lucid dreamers to signal using eye movements, since the eyes are the one part of the body not paralyzed. Then while those people were asleep and dreaming and confirmed to be asleep by their brain activity, the researchers asked them questions. Simple arithmetic, yes or no questions, spoken out loud into the room. And the sleepers answered. From inside the dream, with their eyes. Read that again. Two-way conversation with a person who is asleep, held in place by their own paralysis inside a world their brain is generating and still able to hear a question from the outside and reply correctly, which tells you the wall was never solid. It is not that the dreaming mind is sealed off. It is that almost nobody has the piece of equipment needed to knock, because that piece of equipment is exactly what gets switched off. And that points at the only thing that reliably helps, which is not a trick so much as a consequence of the mechanism. If the problem is that nothing checks, then the fix is to make checking automatic. This is what people who learn to become lucid actually do, and it sounds almost too plain to work. Several times a day, while fully awake, they stop and genuinely ask whether they are dreaming. Not as a joke. They look at their hands or at the text on a sign or at a clock and they actually examine it. Awake, the answer is always no, which feels like a waste of time. But that is the point. You are not doing it for the answer. You are drilling the question until asking it becomes a habit that runs on its own without needing a decision. And habits are held somewhere other than the system that goes offline at night. So eventually the question fires while you are in the corridor. And this time, because it arrived automatically, rather than requiring the judge to summon it, it gets asked. You look at your hands, and they are wrong, and the whole thing comes apart. It does not work for everyone, and it takes weeks rather than days. But the logic of it is exactly the logic of everything above. You cannot install a critic in a sleeping brain. You can only leave a question running where the critic used to sit and hope it goes off. So what does all of this mean for you lying in the dark tonight? It means something about your mind that is easy to say and hard to absorb. The part of you that doubts is not a permanent feature of being you. You experience your critical judgment as fundamental, as simply what it is like to be a thinking person. Of course, I know a talking dog is impossible. Of course, I would notice if the room changed. But that faculty is a specific system in a specific place that can be turned off. And when it is off, you do not experience its absence as a loss. That is the disturbing part. You do not lie in the dream thinking my judgment seems impaired tonight. There is no gap where it used to be. The world simply becomes entirely believable, and you become a creature who believes everything, and you have no way whatsoever of detecting the change from the inside. You have spent roughly a third of your life in that condition, and you will spend a third of the rest of it there too. And there is a second thing which is quieter and perhaps stranger. Every night your brain builds a world, complete with people, physics, weather, a place you are standing, a reason to be worried. Fully immersive, produced in real time entirely from stored material and no external input at all, which means the machinery of your waking experience is not a window. It is a construction engine. Right now it is being constrained and corrected by the information coming through your senses and by that critic in the front of your skull, and the result feels like simply seeing the world. Take those constraints away for a few hours, and the same engine produces a corridor that leads to a beach. The world you walk around in is not a picture arriving from outside. It is a model built in here, held in line by evidence. Dreams are what that machine does when nothing is checking it. So come back to the question, standing in that corridor with legs that will not carry you. Why does your brain trap you in your own dreams? Not because you are unconscious. You were there the entire time, thinking, deciding, afraid. Not because it is random noise. Random noise does not build a house you recognize and put someone you love inside it. You are trapped because two systems switch off every night on purpose, and each one takes away a different exit. The judge at the front of your brain goes quiet, so nothing in the dream is ever questioned. Nothing looks wrong. There is no moment where you step back because the part of you that steps back is not there. And your body is disconnected at the brainstem deliberately so that a mind rehearsing a chase does not send a sleeping person running into furniture. The commands go out. Nothing answers. And your dreaming mind, needing an explanation, tells you the air has gone thick. You cannot wake up on command because waking is not a decision. It is a process that has to run, and the one who would have started it is off duty. So you are not being held prisoner by the dream. You are being held by the absence of the part of you that would have objected. The monster in the corridor was never the problem. The problem was that nobody was awake to say, this is not a corridor and that is not real and you can leave. You need to run. And your legs will not work, and your voice will not carry, and the exit will not open. But now, you know what is actually happening. Somewhere in the dark, your body is lying perfectly still, held safe by a system doing exactly its job. And the part of you that would have called this ridiculous is resting because it has been auditing the world all day, and it is allowed a few hours off. And it is worth knowing on the nights it goes badly, that none of it can reach you. The paralysis always lifts. The figure in the doorway has no material to be made of except your own. Nothing in that room is capable of following you out. It will be back at its desk in the morning, and you will open your eyes into a world that finally holds still and you will not think for a second about how much work that takes.